Well, hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to everybody joining us today for our event, Nurturing Yourself and Others in Times of Crisis. My name is Abby and I'm the Events and Partnership Manager at DropBio, and I'm excited to be facilitating this event today. Before I introduce today's guests, I would like to firstly acknowledge and pay respects to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of the nations on which we each stand today. For anyone here today who is new to DropBio Health, we've been around for a few years now, and our mission is to help people to improve their health through lifestyle and blood biomarker data. We do this through our free events with health experts and products, such as our at-home finger prick blood test wellbeing. To join the waitlist ahead of our next release, check out the link in our chat box. Wellbeing for Teams is a high-impact health and wellbeing events platform delivering virtual education experiences to team members of organisations as part of their employee value proposition. To find out more, look for the link in our chat box. Now to introduce today's guests. Sarah Hunter has been the Managing Director at Officeworks since January 2019. She's passionate about providing a safe, collaborative and empowering environment for over 9,500 team members, supporting the communities and environment in which we live and work. Her experience working in companies both big and small, and most recently at Coles, overseeing the implementation of the proposed demerger from Wesfarmers, has given her a strong sense of the challenges of growing a business and what matters. Alex Staley joined Officeworks in 2012 and is currently the General Manager of People. Alex is highly experienced in retail and consumer goods, with over 20 years in the industry as a specialist in global sourcing, merchandise, marketing, and CSR. Alex is passionate about driving successful business outcomes through people. And Phil Clair is an entrepreneur determined to change the way humans engage with their health and wellbeing. Phil is the co-founder and CEO at DropBio Health. Under his leadership, DropBio Health has built a world-class multidisciplinary team, clinical product development partnerships, and a product platform that is fueling entry and growth into the health, mental health and wellness markets. Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. For our audience, please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself and join the conversation. And if you have any questions for our guests, please put them in the Q&A box below to be answered. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our CEO, Phil, to chat to Sarah and Alex about nurturing yourself and others in times of crisis. Thanks, Phil.
Hey, Abby, thanks very much. And for everyone joining, thank you for joining us today. I know that we have a number of people tuning in from all over the country and some overseas as well. And it's a real pleasure to connect with Sarah and Alex because we've got a lot to talk about in terms of health and wellbeing and our teams and ourselves and all the stuff we have to do and all the life we've lived over the last sort of 3 years. Before we jumped on, we were talking a bit about, coming into Christmas. And I think it's fair to say that everyone is just racing towards the line this year because it's just been one of those years. It's been a minute. So to Sarah and Alex, we've got a bunch of questions to walk through. Of course, for those tuning in, please add your questions in the chat box as Abby mentioned, and we'll get stuck into it. But I just want to say, when the opportunity came up to talk to the team at Officeworks, all I wanted to say in the first instance was thank you, because when we were homeschooling, the amount of visits we did to Officeworks to make sure that we had the supplies for the craft that was being manufactured 24/7 in our house was just next level. So to everyone at Officeworks, thank you so much for just being there, because had you have not been there, I think we would have lost it, frankly. So thank you very much. And without further ado, let's just jump into this, because I'm super curious to hear about how both at a personal level, both you and Alex, Sarah, have sort of moved and navigated the business through this time, and also just how you're thinking about the business. But Sarah, let's start with you.
Yeah.
How do you look after yourself when there is just so much going on at home, at work, and then all the other factors that we've just seen smash us around the head over the last sort of 2 years?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Phil. And before I answer it, I would also like to pay my respects. I'm on to the elders, both past and present. Anyone who is a First Nations person on this call today, I'm on Bunurong Wurundjeri land, the Kulin Nation, and acknowledging our Indigenous heritage and our Indigenous people is so important. It's important for health and wellbeing. It's important to feel resolved, and it's a really big part of being a good human, which is one of our values at Officeworks. So so for anyone who is Indigenous on the call, thank you so much for everything that you do to educate the 93% or the 96% to come, 97% to come to the 3%. So thank you. Look, how do I look after myself? It's a great question. One of the answers is exactly what you said about homeschooling. I have 3 young children. My youngest just turned 3 actually on Sunday. And having things to do that aren't involving digital technology is really good for your health and well-being. So during COVID, I took up 2 things that helped me with my health and well-being, and both things have continued in our household. So the kids and I used to have colouring in dates. So we became, I'm not really arty, Alex will attest to that. I'm not creative enough to be able to design my own, but I am quite fastidious about colouring within the lines. So I was delighted that our Born Art and Craft range kind of really came into its own through COVID. And my son and I have our own markers that are like the more grown up markers. And then the girls have the washable variety so that it doesn't decorate the whole house. But we have digital detox colouring in time. That's really important. And then on the flip side, we learned to use digital technology in a way to connect and a way to interact, I think, through COVID that we've never seen before. And I'll give you a practical example. So often people think about social media and digital and technology as kind of negative in a health and wellbeing context. Here's a positive example. During COVID, I took up with my son piano lessons. And I have never met my teacher. We just call each other on a Friday afternoon, and he will do his half-hour lesson and I do my half-hour lesson. She lives completely over the other side. I live in Victoria, at least an hour's drive away. I've never met her, but I've been doing piano lessons now for nearly 3 years. And that is really good for my health and well-being. And then I think the other thing I would say that is important is being able to turn the devices off and being able to turn off your inside voice and actually be present in the moment and in the conversation. And whether that be with family, with friends, or at work. And that isn't always easy. It isn't always easy when you're in a crisis, and it's really easy to be distracted by the crisis. So being present is a muscle that we all have to practice and keep practicing. And I think I'm not calling coming out of COVID, because every time we feel like we're coming out, something else happens. But what I would say as an organisation in the last 6 months we've had to get better at is actually acknowledging that we need to move past the crisis psychology and into a more planful, agile change environment, and embrace that rather than being in the adrenaline of a crisis.
Yes, I think that's a really interesting point. We'll dive into that. Alex, can I ask you, I mean, how do you look after yourself? You look after all of these people, plus at home, plus everything. Tell me what you do to look after yourself.
Yeah, look, it has been an interesting couple of years. I think, very similar to Sarah. Look, I was very lucky during the pandemic when we were in lockdown, and Sarah and I are both in Victoria, so we were locked down more than any other city in the world. Yeah. So that certainly had its own challenges. I have 2 teenage children, so I didn't really have the homeschooling drama. And actually having them close to me was really nice. That my husband was at home as well. So I think, I was very much one of the lucky people during that period. I also had certainty of employment, which, took away that anxiety a lot of people had. Do I have a job? Don't I have a job? And that was certainly one of the things we ensured for our team. I love exercising, so that was one of my things. It still is. I'm a real dag. I do jigsaw puzzles on the weekend, and that's kind of my mindfulness, I think, to help me, just switch off a little bit as well, just get into something quite tactile, and that's almost like a meditation for me, and I try and do that on the weekends. And it's interesting. I think it's one of those things, is knowing yourself as well. And the older I've got, the more I kind of know myself and what to look out for in terms of, maybe triggers that I need to step back a bit or just readjust. And I think it's like anything. I love my work, love my family, you know, love exercising, all those things. It's just when you're overworking one, it's probably a bit of a sign that something's a little bit out of kilter. And Sarah will know, a couple of weeks ago, we had a pretty intense time at work, and I was feeling, you know, I started grinding my teeth again, getting headaches, you know, all the signs that you go, maybe I should just, maybe something's not right here. And I did. I sat down with Sarah and said, look, I'm just going to pull back from some of the, you know, the social events at work. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of time to settle down again, and which I've done over the last few weeks. And I've got to say, today's the first day back at the gym, feeling good, you know, cleared the mind, feel a lot sharper. So I think sometimes you do get in the spiral, and it is being able to identify when you need to just change something, and being open enough and on enough to have those conversations with the people around you to say, you know what, I'm not quite 100% at the moment. I just need to do something a bit different. So yeah, and having those support people around you is obviously really important.
We'll get to those heuristics in a second, because I think if there's one thing that's become clear in, you know, at least in Drop and our partner companies, and certainly in all the people that we support, is that we've learned to listen to ourselves a little bit better over the last little while. And because everybody's sort of in that same situation, we find that having those kind of conversations where maybe just need a bit of extra support, just need to vent, just need to sort of be open and honest, it's a more accepted thing to do, no matter how senior or junior you might be. So I think if there's a silver lining from COVID, I think that's certainly one of them. I loved your idea about the puzzles. We did the same sort of thing. I took it one step further with two young girls, our daughters, and taught them how to deliver dad jokes. And so it sort of ended up being, there's a lot of laughter, which was obviously false laughter, because dad jokes are awesome, but they were still learning, and they've still got a long way to go. Let's just put it that way. But it was a lot of fun during the time. So let's get to these heuristics. I'm really interested to hear about, I mean, Alex, you gave us some a second ago about what sort of makes you stop and pause. You know, it's something to sort of help team members understand that we all have different heuristics, and they're all different signals that we can all listen to. You made mention of a couple of other ones. What was maybe one that sort of surprised you over the last couple of years, that you've caught yourself a couple of times going, actually, yeah, I now need to sort of decompress a little, take a step back, or take a breath?
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was during the early days of the pandemic, and I think it was definitely, you know, the adrenaline had kicked in. There was a huge amount to do. I was in corporate affairs at that stage, so a lot of government relations, a lot of actually working out what we were meant to be doing, what weren't we meant to be doing. Can we open our stores? Can't we open our stores? You know, there was just so much going on from a work perspective, personal perspective. I've got an elderly mother who I was concerned about, obviously my kids at school, they were doing homeschooling, and I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's great. I'm just flying through it, bang, 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 making it happen, go, go, go. And then I started having some problems with my teeth, and I'm just like, oh, that's fine, that's fine. And went to the dentist, and the dentist said, we've cracked 2 teeth from grinding them so hard. So my consciousness was saying, yeah, I'm fine. But grinding my teeth at night was that kind of, my body was telling me, no, you're not fine. And I think I've become a lot more aware of that, particularly when the adrenaline kicks in, that you just have to understand that maybe there are things going on, those underlying things, and what happens when the adrenaline comes off as well, I think is a big watch out for all of us. Particularly, we've come off this adrenaline of probably 2.5 years of being in crisis mode. So yeah, for me, I think even, you know, from the start of COVID to even when I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, I picked up on the signals much quicker. So really reading those signals a lot quicker and stopping the behaviour and just taking a step back.
I mean, yeah, like that's super helpful. Sarah, for you, what are some of those heuristics for you?
I think it's really interesting. I remember reasonably early in my career, and we did a course kind of in the second half of COVID. It got rescheduled a couple of times with all of our senior leaders. We invested in quite a big focus in 2 parts in person on a resilience program for all of them. And one of the things that came out of the resilience kind of program, which were great reminders for me, one is sleep, the importance of sleep. And the second one is the importance of being able to breathe. And I use that in the context, the breathing part, in the context of the example that I'm going to give. So early on in my career, I realized that when adrenaline kicked in for me, like a lot of people, fight or flight, you hold your breath, you don't breathe.
Stop breathing. Yep.
Breathing out is so important, and being able to breathe out in a, obviously yoga teaches you that, meditation teaches you that, any kind of competitive sport teaches you how important breath is. And running a business or leading people is almost like a competitive sport in that context. So you're feeling that sense of adrenaline. Anyway, Alex has no idea where I'm going with this. She'll laugh at this one. I realized that at a certain time every day, I would breathe in and not breathe out. And that was when the COVID numbers were coming out and Dan Andrews was doing a press conference.
Yep.
And I realized it was really not good for my health and well-being to look at it.
Yeah.
And I remember we had a conversation as a leadership team. And I remember the exact conversation when we said, no more will we talk to COVID case numbers with our teams. We're going to talk to vaccination rates.
Mm-hmm.
And we made a really conscious decision about focusing, not beating to the drum of the press conference or beating to the rhythm of the COVID case numbers. We'd be on a call like this and people would be putting the case numbers up as they came through.
Mm-hmm.
It was fueling an anxiety, and it was fueling the organization breathing in and not breathing out. And so for me personally, I can remember when I said I'm not actually watching any more of those press conferences. And I know. I still get heart palpitations being based in Vic when my husband puts on his North Face jacket. I'm like, but I think being alert to the physical reaction that you have, and then actually acknowledging that by displaying that then across thousands of people, we were adding to their anxiety levels.
Yep.
So being able to change that that emphasis and really focus on vaccination rates and something positive that gave the team a sense of control in an environment where we had very little control was super important. And my physical breath is what gave me the sign.
It's fascinating. I think a few things, when we think about the way that people look at us as leaders, people pick up on a whole bunch of little things, a bit like our kids do. And sometimes where somebody will have noticed, I'm sure someone would have noticed that was something in you at the time. They might not have mentioned it, but it was something that they were sort of taking on board as well. Heuristically, in my first career out of school was in the military. And one of the things that we were taught quite often was the idea about the speed to make a decision. And in some cases, it's a pretty high risk environment. But the reality being that if you find as though you react very quickly to a stimulus, that should give you a very clear signal that you don't know enough about the situation to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And so that was through COVID, that was happening a lot. Like it was really redlining very frequently. And so I think one of the things I sort of harked back to that toolbox around the breathing in particular was go back to the old box breathing, sort of breathe through it and just make sure that you're sort of getting to a point of asking a question, do I know enough to make a decision? And then looking to your team to give some support for that. It was tremendously helpful through that process. Sarah, can I just build on what you've just said? How do you know if one of your team is not doing well? What are you looking for to try and not make it deeply obvious to them that there's a problem, but obviously just wanting to sort of extend a level of care and support, because obviously you're trying to be shoulder to shoulder with your team and the broader Officeworks team as well?
Yeah, look, I think, Phil, it starts with your culture and having a culture where your team feel confident to speak out. And you mentioned earlier on in this session that one of the benefits of COVID, I think, is that the conversation about health and wellbeing is much stronger societally than it was pre-COVID. At Officeworks, we've always had health, safety, and wellbeing. And, I'd love to get to a point where we don't have to say all three words, but at the moment, culturally, we're not there yet. So health, safety, and wellbeing. has always been the first thing we start a conversation with, whether that be one of our leadership events, whether that be we just had all of our stores and operational teams on a call this morning. We always start with safety. We start every one of our Monday OLT meetings with safety, health and wellbeing. So I think creating a safe environment where not only is it safe for people to voice, I'm not feeling well or I'm feeling unwell, and not being critical of incident numbers or absence levels and things like that, not tracking the wrong metrics that drive the wrong culture about speaking up and having that conversation is the first step.
Yeah, I agree.
I think authenticity, like it genuinely being, unless you genuinely care, people won't share. So I think it's really important that you are, you are genuine about the topic as well. And so it's not just a passing, how was your day or how are you feeling? It's a genuine, hey, Alex, you don't look, the best version of yourself. And having a genuine conversation about it. And then it's just knowing your team well. These screens are not great for being able to pick up on the cues around how someone is feeling.
Yep.
But on the flip side, accessibility and authenticity has meant we've seen through our Your Best Life program, which is our health and wellbeing program, and all the different dimensions to that, we've seen a confidence in our team leveraging and reaching out on technology to say they're not having their best day, they're not living their best life, and they need some help. So I think for my direct reports, hopefully we have the trust and the relationships in place, and we do physically actually see each other. Alex and I are in the same building today. We do see each other, so we know each other well enough that from a peer perspective, but also from a line manager perspective, we can have those conversations. More broadly, I want a culture at Officeworks, which, we are moving towards, where through our engagement surveys, we hear our team say they know health, safety and wellbeing is our number one priority. Over 90% of them clearly tell us every 6 months that they know it's our number one priority. Right. And so they feel confident sharing how they're feeling, which means they feel confident asking for help. And for me, I can't know 9,500 people one-on-one, but I am constantly surprised how many message me telling me they're having a great day today or something, just giving me feedback. Sometimes also they message me when they're not having a great day and they're feeling like hurting themselves and they need a hand. And so for us, it starts with culture and that support. But technology plays an important role too. Yeah,
super powerful. Alex, did you want to build on that at all from your perspective?
Yeah, I will. And look, obviously in my role, I need to have a bit of a pulse on where the team's at. So, for my own personal team, clearly easier when you're face to face, you see them every day. You can pick up on changed working habits if they're not delivering, and they usually do deliver, if they're a bit more absent, if the screen's off during a meeting, and just the physical just looking at people and physically seeing how they're going. So for me, the immediate team's probably the easiest to pick up, and you know them well, what's happening in their family, their trigger points, what's happening. In terms of the whole organisation, Sarah did touch on a few things. We do our culture surveys, which we've just run, which is in our business is Your Say, and we have, really high participation rates, and we do ask the team, how are you going? So we do have feedback on that, which gives us an indication of where they're at, which is a really good way to pinpoint, are there pockets of our team who are struggling, are there roles, are there age groups, etc. And then we can tailor some of those programs directly to them. So I think that's definitely one listening post for me, and a really important one. Yep. Then, in terms of just more broadly, it can be even things like, injuries that are happening. You can pick up if people aren't switched on at the moment. Why aren't they switched on? What's going on more broadly? we look at things, you know, some of the cases in terms of why people are off work and explore that. Are there issues more broadly around why they're off from work as well? So I think, you know, there are a whole heap of data points that we need to really look into. And you know, for me, this is, and Sarah will always laugh because we do have a data analytics team. And I was like, how do I get all this data and actually pinpoint, you know, where the problems are? How do we actually get to them before the problems happen? What are the lead indicators so that we can help our team before they even know they need help as well? So, you know, for me, I'm really passionate about, you know, using big data to try and work through how do we identify, how do we help our team proactively rather than reactionary as well. So, yeah, lots of data points coming through.
Yeah, it's such a time to learn as well from that data, because for the most part, we've not had that data set before. So being able to sort of pull it apart and actually make sense of it is it's a huge opportunity. We stole something shamelessly from Brene Brown on the digital side. And she calls it a 2-word check-in. And so every Monday in our Slack group that we sort of send something out every day, the question is asked and every team member is asked to respond, you know, describe 2 words to describe how you're feeling today. And it's been surprising how when there has been just an abnormal use of a word by a team member, it sort of gives you a signal that I might just check in with you later today and just see if there is something there that we wouldn't have known otherwise. And it's a pretty overt and direct request, and it does inspire a little bit of vulnerability. But it's also been very helpful for the rest of the team to go, I might just, it's not just Phil's job to reach out to the person. I might just reach out to them as well and just check and see if they're okay. So it makes a huge amount of sense. Now, we've had a question come through, which is also relevant to what we just talked about. So Alex, I'll throw it to you first. How do you build trust and connection with a team that works remotely? And I suspect this is coming from somebody who might be a team leader who has got a bunch of people working in a whole bunch of co-located sort of things. Any tips or advice around that?
Yeah, and I think, look, this is one I wish I had the, if I had the answer for this, I probably wouldn't be sitting at Officeworks, you know, in this role. I'd be, you know, selling the tip. And I don't think there is that one approach. I mean, we really, in our teams, try to connect as many ways as possible. So even during COVID, where we, you know, there were a fair few restrictions, you know, I did a lot of walk and talk meetings, catch up with, you know, with someone or a couple of us would go for a walk, you know, having even virtually, it's better than nothing. So I think we also had a lot of quiz days, which I'm sure everyone did. We had some absolutely ridiculous things we were doing, but it was just that interaction. And I think the frequency, and it's a really hard balance to get, oh God, I'm always on a Zoom call, but making sure you're connected. And I think, you know, for me, it was make sure the cameras are on. And I think that's something as an organisation we've really pushed, because you can see people. As soon as you can see them, there's more of a connection, even if it's not the face-to-face connection you'd really like. It is a balancing act, and wherever we could, it was getting together. So, you know, I think for me, I have a fair few of my team remote as well. So my people partners, my safety partners are all in the States with our stores. But making those quarterly catch-ups even more important, I think. You know, we're probably where they used to come down for half a day, we've got them down for a day and a half, really making the most of the in-person events and making sure it's not just, you know, in a business, you always want to give them as much information as possible. It's actually going, no, let's build in time for networking. Let's have an extra half an hour at lunch. Let's have the drinks afterwards, you know, making sure we have as much time for people to connect in person when we can, I think has become really even more important, as opposed to dumping information on them. You know, that's certainly one of the things. And we're trying to get the balance between all of that.
Yeah, and it can be a tricky balance too. I don't think there's a very simple answer to that, because, you know, the moods and behaviours and energy levels of the team change pretty dynamically now.
Yeah.
Sarah, if we went back sort of before COVID, no, I know it's hard to think back that far, but if we went back to that point and you looked at the policies, procedure, culture that Officeworks had, and you think about, you know, if somebody went into an intranet site and said, I want to look up, you know, what we do here as far as, you know, workplace wellness is concerned, versus what's been sort of implemented over the last 2 or 3 years, Can you sort of reflect a bit on the change that's gone on through that process in terms of what's been introduced? I know there's been some fabulous initiatives brought to bear, but how different was it from pre-COVID to what you're sort of seeing evolve over the last couple of years?
It's a great question. So if I go back to pre-COVID time, I would say culturally, our aspiration, the feedback from our team, I mentioned in our Your Say survey, the first one we did, which was probably about 6 months after I started, our first proper engagement survey we did, it had safety, health and wellbeing right up there. That hasn't moved, but that was led from the top. So when I joined the business, to give you an example, our TRIFR was over 10. That's our total recordable injury frequency rate, and it's now sitting in the mid 5s, which is world class from a retail perspective. Now we're never happy until it's 0, and that will always be the case.
Yes.
So I think across the Wesfarmers Group and across retail in Australia, we were already taking a leadership position. We were the first Wesfarmers division to appoint a senior leader, a direct report to me as a GM of health and wellbeing, also looking after safety. So we were already investing in and had created the Your Best Life program before COVID hit. What did COVID change? What COVID changed for us was how we did it, not the intent and the cultural drive to do it, nor did it actually materially change our investment, because it is an investment. We're a large employer of people. People are our competitive advantage. Our team is our competitive advantage, and they're our best asset.
Yep.
So that psychology, that cultural focus didn't change. But the fact that we couldn't actually travel, we couldn't actually go out and see each other, meant we had to, let's use a COVID word, pivot how we did stuff and how we engaged the team. So bringing on board Moving Minds for us in 2020 and 2021, that's a little Australian startup based out of Victoria. I mean, that was transformative, running a 12-week health and wellbeing program where the team, it was all virtual. The team could build teams, because we know connecting is about being part of a team as well. So it wasn't forced, it was very organic. And to have, over 6,000 of our team organically opt in to participate in a 12-week health and wellbeing program, conveniently timed, actually not deliberately, when we were in lockdown, in both cases, made a massive difference to our team. And being able to compete, being able to engage and talk about something that had nothing to do with COVID really positively changed the mindset. So we would never have thought of doing that program, Alex, would we? Before, it would have been much more face-to-face, how we would have engaged. And in fact, our behavioural safety program we're rolling out at the moment, called Switch On, is face-to-face. It is much more of a face-to-face program. So there's absolutely a role for both. And as Alex said, the connection is so important. It's something I think maybe we all took for granted that we're now reinvigorating. But I would honestly say, Phil, it was a focus before COVID. That's not changed. It's just changed how we execute it. I think the one thing I would add, though, that did change for us is around flexibility. Retail is traditionally flexible as an industry. We're out in stores, we're out in our distribution centres. So if you looked at our data before COVID, most people were in our support centre. Obviously, our stores all operating in stores and DCs out in DCs, but most people in our support centre would have been in the office 3.5 days, maybe 4 days a week, maybe. We still travelled a lot. We're a national business. We have suppliers overseas. So we were still out and about in the business. In fact, I'd worry if a retailer wasn't out with its teams and out in its stores, albeit our biggest store is online. So for us, what really shifted was the commercial opportunity around flexibility and hybrid working. And how did we take a leadership role in helping Australia navigate, and we're certainly not there yet, navigate on that journey and learn how to do it with safety, health and wellbeing at the heart of it.
Yep.
So we actually stood up a platform called Officeworks, which we built completely remotely. The team never met each other actually until the launch date, which was in the end of March this year, when we could kind of start to bring groups back together again. That was the first time they'd all met. We built this new platform with new suppliers who we'd never met around Australia, built it all in Australia. And it enables businesses to set up their team to work safely in a hybrid way, essentially. Okay. But we wanted to do it on our terms, which means that at the start of, and it's a free platform, you just got to sign your team up basically. But at the start of it, there's an ergonomic assessment.
Okay.
Because as an employer who had to figure out, as we did, how to get all of our team to work remotely, the first thing we thought about was, how do we do that safely?
Yes. And
how do we know that they're set up in a way so they're not going to hurt their backs, and we've given them the right kit and they've got the right setup in their environment? So working with WorkSafe Australia, we built an ergonomic assessment into the start of that. And obviously we think it's going to be a great platform, we think, for us going forward, that we can bolt in other partners and other services around health and wellbeing as well, which is really core to how we do business. So that is a conversation. We had a flexibility policy. Sure, we've tweaked it, we've moved it forward, but we never would have thought about building a business around hybrid working 4 years ago, and trying to do it in a way that actually takes a safety, health and wellbeing leadership position, as opposed to a tech, furniture, stationery.
That's right. A really functional kind of thing.
Yeah.
I would have loved FlexiWorks 2 years ago. That would have been fantastic for us.
Well, you can jump on board now, Phil.
Signing up.
There's my offer. There's my offer. Go look
Fantastic.
it up. FlexiWorks.
Alex, from your vantage point, there's a lot of good things coming out of an occasion like this. When we think about burnout, and there's a question that we've had come up in the chat box here. So, burnout is a real thing. I think we all try to be as brave as we can, put forward the best sort of position that we can. I think most people try to think about, the concept of Sonder, and, everyone's problems are as equally spread, and people have got their own lives, their own pieces. But at some point, life can get pretty tricky and it can get pretty hard. I think we're all feeling a degree of, let me just get to Christmas because I just need to sort of not think about stuff and maybe just sleep for 12 hours a day and see how it works out for me. Yeah. How are you thinking about that from, a 9,000 strong workforce that, inevitably is going to be facing a whole range of different issues around burnout and trying to support them through that process? How do you even begin to think about burnout in the context of a large group of people like that?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Phil. And we do have, because we're such a broad business, we have very different types of burnout too, I would say, across the network. So we have, the majority of our team are in stores. We've just had Black Friday, as we kind of mentioned, we're heading into Christmas, and then our busiest trading period, which is back to school. So for our store teams, that physical burnout is real in terms of the hours they're working, the volume of stock they're moving, the customers they're serving, et cetera, et cetera. So we do encourage team members this really busy period to take a break. So clearly they have their annual leave, and then afterwards. So how do we recover the team afterwards? Because that's often, again, when I talk about the adrenaline flowing, during that period, it's an amazing time in our business over back to school. It is just great. Get all these kids coming in, the parents, they're so excited about going back to school and getting their book lists and everything. So it's a really amazing vibe in the stores. But then how are we aware and ensuring that our team get that proper break when we come off the other side of it? So being aware of the busy periods, I think, is absolutely vital for us to know it. The same as our CFCs, which is our warehouses, our distribution centres, the volume they are doing, and we have to ensure, their physical safety first and foremost. But the volume of they're putting through the system is pretty incredible. So again, ensuring they have that support come the other end of it. ensuring they're getting the rest, just watching out. And I think, Officeworks has a great culture of watching out for each other, and we have that instilled in the team. Then we have the support office, which again is a very different proposition in terms of the burnout they have, and it comes at different stages. And I think it comes for different teams at different stages as well. And again, I think it's some of the things I talked about. It is understanding your own team, watching out for what's coming. And we do have a number of programs as well. I mean, we have EPA, which obviously our team members can access. We've also just launched Converge Life, which is a tool for all our teams to monitor everything: sleep, diet, the mental, physical, all aspects, that holistic aspect of wellbeing, and really getting the team to engage on that. Also for our very senior leaders, Sarah did mention, we ran a couple of resilience programs like from the beginning of the year and also during the year to really help the team manage burnout. But we're also very aware of, are we causing the burnout? So being really clear about what the projects they're working on, what are the clear deliverables? Are we being, do we have the right support, and ensuring those really critical programs of work are supported in the right way, so we're not stretching people until they are feeling burnt out. So I think there's so many different aspects, as a business we work on, and it is something you have to work on every single day, because every single person will be going through different personal things in their life, different work things in their life. It is so multidimensional, and I think, the team, you have to be aware of collectively how the organisation's travelling, but also how the individual is travelling as well.
Yeah, no, I totally believe that. Can I ask Sarah about encouragement?
Yes.
So my team know that I'm big on encouragement, because I think it's one of those things that ends up being a bit lost sometimes in sort of a corporate work culture, where it's one thing to sort of have the employee of the month. It's quite another to sort of just say, and just quietly say to somebody, you're doing just an amazing job. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it just takes that. And then I've had the occasion before where I've just said that to somebody and they burst into tears. So obviously things were a little bit, just below the surface. In other cases, people have just never really been in an environment where encouragement was a thing. Encouragement was like a financial bonus, or it was something that was sort of not quite direct. It was sort of signaled in a particular kind of way. And I'm really interested to understand from both your perspectives, but Sarah, starting with you, about when you think about encouragement at a really individual level, or even at a company or division level. And I know, being part of a conglomerate like Wesfarmers, there's another sort of level of size and scope. But so what's your philosophy on encouragement at a sort of a personal and company level? How do you do it, and what gives you joy when you do?
Good choice of word, Phil. Joy.
Yep.
I think, anyone who knows me would say I'm very, very clearly a glass half full person. I am a person who comes from a position of, carrot rather than stick. As a preference. And so I really start each day with a view, in my personal life as well, don't sweat the small stuff, but actually recognize that no one gets out of bed mostly to do a bad job or be a bad person or be a bad human, right? So therefore, taking the moment to recognize that and say thank you is really important. And I'm sitting here looking at it now, because I don't know if you can see, I've got a whole bunch of thank you cards on my desk, because I need to write some thank yous today. And I write for our loyal service team, 10 years, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. We had a 30 year and a 20, or 35 year and a 20 year. I went down to one of our stores in Vic last week and presented. We've had a 45 year. Now, Officeworks isn't 45 years old, but that's across the Wesfarmers group. Taking those moments to recognise, whether it be loyal service, someone going outside of the, going above and beyond, or just someone who's helped a customer. We have pins. You'll see if you go in an Officeworks store, we have lots of different pins for recognition.
I'll be looking for those now.
For me, they're the moments to say thank you and recognize they're not financial. You know, we have a bonus scheme for the team. We have STI programs. We give every one of our team members $1,000 in shares if you're a full-time, part-time, permanent team member on an annual basis. So there's plenty of financial moments, but the part that really engenders and drives loyalty and discretionary effort and a connection and pride to work at Officeworks, another number on our engagement survey that's very high. Our team are really proud to wear their blues.
Yep.
Is that recognition. It's that thank you. It's that, oh, I got something special. The managing director gave me a pin, or my boss gave me a pin, or one of my peers did, or a customer bothered to write in and say something positive about something I had done.
Yep.
And I encourage every one of our customers on this call, if someone does something amazing for you in a retail environment, because they do get the customers who are pretty horrible and nasty, please take a moment to give that positive feedback, because for that team member, that will be a moment they don't forget.
That's
you
it.
know? So I'm with you, Phil. I think there's not enough positive energy in the world, particularly at the moment. There's a lot going on. Another moment, I choose not to watch the news very often. I just use my ABC News app. It's really depressing. And I think actually, you know, our team really love and flourish from that positive recognition. Now, it doesn't mean it's all got to be roses.
That's right.
The reality is we still need to deliver returns to shareholders, and we've still got to deliver our performance. But they also get real positive energy from hitting their numbers and hitting their targets. They're a very performance-focused organisation, we are. So, you know, sharing with them green arrows, whether that be on safety, whether that be on NPS, whether that be on the financials, that's what they want to hear and feel. And they just love it when we all, you know, who doesn't love getting a letter in the post or a card in the post that's not a bill? It actually says, thank you. You were a really great human. You delivered amazing service today to one of our customers, and I'm really grateful.
It's funny because I think my youngest daughter, who is now 7, asked what was the purpose of a mailbox. So I think, yes, the more that
Alex can see me because I've got a story on that, Phil.
Go tell.
What did you say to your 7-year-old daughter?
Oh, I said things come in it which tell us what things that we need to do. That was the best I could come up with at the time. It was a pretty crap answer, to be honest. But when it comes down to you know, letters coming from grandparents in particular, cards and those kind of things, we've got a pretty active pen pal style relationship between the grandparents, and they do love being able to see things come in there. So they do get it, but there's not enough of it, I think it's fair to say.
So take that a step forward. We're going to be moving part of our support centre in Vic next year to a new work environment that will help our team actually work in a more hybrid way, in a more collaborative way, because that's what they've told us is good for their health and wellbeing. That's why they want to come to work at Officeworks, and that's why they want to come to a team hub environment, because they want to collaborate and connect with their colleagues. And also quiet workspace. For me personally, I get out of the house away from the 3 young children, so it's actually helpful to come to the office on occasion.
Oh, yes.
But we're going to make sure that every one of our team has a locker that they can personalize, that they can feel connected, like we maybe did at school, where we had a locker at school.
Yep.
But what's one of the things, Alex, we're going to put in our lockers?
We're going to put a little postal slot where we can, I said to put memos in, like in the old school, and yes, to put messages in, so we can message our team and find surprise and delight, I would hope, on those occasions, because there is nothing like, as we all know, getting a lovely piece of mail.
I think that's pretty cool. That's very, very cool. I wonder, and we're going to sort of run close to time, but I just wanted to thank you both for just an extraordinary conversation. I'm wondering, you know, when we think about work and life balance, there was a thing, I think, in the 90s and then maybe 2000s and maybe the 20-teens where work-life balance seemed to get a bit of a head of steam. And I think a lot of people realized that it wasn't so much balance, but more integrating work and life and making it work for you as an individual, work for your business, and work for people you're there to serve. When you think about work-life integration, for your team leaders, so people who are looking at store managers and the like, how do you encourage them to help their people live that kind of life? Obviously, there are fixed times that people have got to be at work, and we've got to sort of maintain that performance culture, Sarah, that you mentioned. But to you, how do you encourage your leaders inside the organization to think about encouraging like personal sustainability for their people?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think some of the tools we have implemented have given our leaders some of the insights into how to think more broadly about how their team are doing. Now, some leaders, as you know, naturally have that ability in terms of really bringing the team in and understanding what's going on in their lives. But I would also say on the flip side, it's also can be very difficult for our leaders who are taking on too much. So we are hearing that, particularly over the pandemic, where that perhaps some of those leaders are taking on too much of the personal, the personal issues and things like that. So we are really now training our team to know when to kind of say, no, you need to see a professional. No, I think, to draw that line sometimes, because it is a lot to take on. You're managing 50 people in a team. It's really, really difficult. But we do have, the tools and tricks. So I think, Sarah mentioned moving minds. So I think that gave the team a really good insight into what are the good behaviours. So then they could start identifying that within their team of, what makes a holistically a wellbeing approach. I think that's a great one. The other one we introduced, actually, amazing timing, at the beginning of the pandemic, was a social media tool. So it's like, it's Workplace, which is like the Facebook. And just having our team, we have a health and wellbeing site. Our team posts, I went on a hike on the weekend. This is, the fresh fruit I'm eating. And really sharing very organically some of the great things people do to look after their health and well-being. So I think it's not only the leaders that we've seen, really supporting our team, but it's also that groundswell, the up as well. So team members wanting to share how they stay well. We have Wellness Wednesday, where people, tune in and give a little bit of an update on how they keep well, whether that's physical, mental health, all the rest of it. So I think there's a lot of different things. It's not now, and I think we all know it, don't we? It's not just leaders leading in this space. We're seeing organically our team members also wanting to share and support and really act as a team.
Yeah, I totally get that. Sarah, can I ask one last question? I'll throw to Alex after this as well. Let's imagine that there is a group of people who have got a reasonably stale kind of culture, that they've sort of missed the memo on COVID, and it's just it's been business as usual before, it's business as usual now, things aren't looking great. And they ask you, if we had to fundamentally change our approach to well-being and safety and the things that you hold so close and such at the core of your business, what would be the tips that you would offer them to think about in order to do that reset? What would be your off the cuff, knowing that it takes years to get this right, and that there are some things you'd like to do that is low hanging fruit?
Yeah.
What would you be saying to them as your counsel?
The same thing that our Your Best Life program says, which is that it starts with you. So if you as a leader don't believe that the safety, health and wellbeing of your team should be your number one priority, then you're never going to convince anyone. You're just never going to. So you have to reconcile in yourself, however you connect with that, whatever your purpose is that helps you connect with why it's just a job at the end of the day, and actually your life and living your best life is the more important message. And until you do that, you can't lead an organization through a cultural change where it is about making that step and that move. So the first thing I would say to any leader who is, let's say, joining a new organization or needs to refresh how an organization approaches and thinks about safety, health and wellbeing, is it starts with you. And if you passionately believe it and you walk the talk, you'll be a leader worth following, and people will follow your behavior. So I think that is the only place to start. It's not the easiest place to start. It's actually probably a pretty hard place to start for a lot of people. But any behavioural safety program, or if you've worked in a high risk environment where it is a conversation about life and death, or you've had a team member who's committed suicide, or you've had a family member who's been impacted personally, or you've been impacted personally, you have to connect with that why, and then recognise that it's a responsibility and it's a privilege to be able to influence and lead people around the topic. So yeah, I think it starts with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Alex, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think just building on Sarah's comments there, and as a leader, sometimes it is having to make those tough decisions if there are people within the organisation who don't culturally fit and who might be undermining what you're trying to achieve. And I think sometimes, particularly in business, it's a very fine line between that commercially performing, but more so really is how their behaviours show through. So, particularly at Officeworks, and particularly when we're recruiting people, we have the culture panel. You might be technically great, but you've got to make it through the culture panel to make sure you have the right values for our organisation, because that is just as important as the technical and performance side of it as well.
Yeah. And our values, Phil, are: we are good humans, we are bold, and we're curious. And we are good humans comes first.
Totally. Yep, I get that. I want to say, on behalf of everyone who's joined us today, a big thank you for taking the time to sort of be with us. I guess all the insights that we've shared today, I'm almost certain the people who've been watching this and watching in the future will take a huge amount from it and start implementing in their new year. And on behalf of our team here, I hope you do get a great break. I know that it's going to be a busy season on the way in, a busy season on the way out, and when you ultimately get a chance to kick your feet up, I do hope you get some downtime. But Abby, back over to you.
Well, thank you so much, guys. That was such an inspiring and valuable conversation. I know we could have probably kept going for another hour or two, and we certainly had lots of questions come through from our community also. So I really want to say a really big thank you to Sarah, Alex, and Phil for sharing all your knowledge and experience with us today. I'd also like to offer a big thanks to all of our attendees for your time and questions. And we really hope you've enjoyed this special Wellbeing for Teams event. Keep an eye out for the replay coming in the next few days, along with some more info on the Officeworks FlexiWorks offering. And if you'd like to understand more about what we do at Drop, make sure you visit our website, join the waitlist for our next Wellbeing release, and learn more about Wellbeing for Teams. Links are in the chat box. But we'll leave it there. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and a safe and happy holiday season. I think we're getting close enough now to start saying that at the end of our events. And thanks again to our wonderful speakers. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.